I think many leaders, definitely, and many people in general, basically get crushed when they try to carry someone else's load as if it were a burden.
I think a lot of it has to do with just how God has wired us. You know, we care for people. We have compassion in our DNA. We want to help people, and that is good, and we should lean into that. But obviously, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing. Someone's desire to want to help can go too far, and you can get to a point where you feel like you got to help everybody.
And I think the reason why many of us feel like we're either overwhelmed, we're tired, we're getting burned out in some cases, is because not only are we trying to share burdens, but we're also shouldering all kinds of additional loads. This is the Made to Advance podcast. I'm your host, Brian Aulick. We're here to inspire and equip you for your best future. Hey, welcome everybody. It is so good to be with you today, and we are excited about this conversation today on Made to Advance. But before we get to it, I want to ask you a favor. Please rate, review, comment on Made to Advance. It's going to help us get the word out. It's going to help us bring on more great guests, and you know what? Overall, it just encourages our team. We do have an upcoming episode where we're going to tackle questions that come from you, our beloved audience. And so if you'd like to have one of your questions considered for discussion, I want to just encourage you to email us, madetoadvance@engedichurch.com. And if you shoot us a note, we're going to make a great big old list of these questions. And then on one day at least, we're just going to sit and answer your deepest questions. So that's the plan. Please reach out to us. Today I have with me Josh Blom, and Josh is Engedi Church's longtime executive pastor. Josh knows how to play more instruments than I can count, and if you have an instrument that he doesn't know how to play, he will learn it if necessary. I found that out. Josh loves competing at stuff. He's done marathons, triathlons, Spartan races, and even beatboxing competitions with me. And so I'm really, really excited to have Josh here today, and I'm excited about the conversation we're going to have. Josh, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. You know, we got to do that beatbox thing sometime. That'd be pretty fun.
We do. It would be memorable. We've done it before.
We have, and it was memorable. So who knows?
Do you have anything you're training for right now?
Well, I've got a bit of an injury that I'm dealing with, but when that is up and running, these high rocks races that are going on, I know lots of people are doing them, but they're just fun. They combine a little bit of strength, a little bit of running, and it's kind of how I like to approach fitness, you know, the strength side, the endurance side, and they're just a fun atmosphere. So they only happen maybe once a year, like races like that, but it's just something fun to train for.
You think you'll do it with, I know the first plan was that you were supposed to do was with Kevin. Do you think you'll do it again with him or not?
If I can keep up with him, yeah. I would enjoy it.
Is he an absolute beast?
Yes.
So everybody, as we're talking about the mysterious Kevin, this is Kevin Rodrigo, who's been on the show a couple of times. So maybe in the show notes we'll jot his episode, but he was Navy SEAL for a long time. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Seems like he knows how to do some stuff.
Oh, man.
Seems like he might have some endurance. You got to throw him in like a deep pool of water with weights around his, like ankles and see how he does.
I would be afraid of what happens when he comes out of the pool and hunts me down. So we'll see about that.
Well, I'm excited to have this conversation. We were at a retreat, staff retreat, and had a theme that we talked a little bit about, which is talking about how we each are carrying weight. This carrying weight, sometimes that weight maybe isn't weight we need to carry or we're supposed to carry. Mm-hmm. But we carry it, and then it gets us real tired because of how heavy it is. And we were talking to leaders when this whole subject came up, and so I think probably a lot of our conversation will have that theme to it. But I'll tell you what, the more I think about this topic, it applies to so many different things. It applies to work relationships, family relationships, you name it. Mm-hmm. But your role here at Engedi as executive pastor, a big part of what you're doing is having conversations with our different team members a lot, and you get a first-hand kind of front row seat on different kinds of weights that people are carrying. So I'd just be curious to hear, when you think of the weights our staff or our leaders carry, what kinds of things do you see or hear about?
Yeah, it comes up a lot, both in the work context, the church, but in life in general. But I think a lot of it has to do with just how God has wired us. We care for people. We have compassion in our DNA. We want to help people, and that is good, and we should lean into that. But obviously, there is such a thing as too much of a good thing, and that's where I think you start to feel people carrying others' burdens unnecessarily. In my role in particular, things that we talk about, because again, I'm coaching primarily church leaders, so for them, they're carrying the spiritual weight of those that they're interacting with. They're, when somebody is going through a really tough time in their marriage, they're feeling that weight. Whether it be parenting or financial struggles. The people that I coach directly are leading within the church and leading departments, so they carry the weight of their team's success. Yeah. They carry the weight of just the overall morale and culture and like the vibe, and they want people to enjoy coming to work and enjoy and find fulfillment in what they're doing. And there's a lot of weight that comes to that if you really, think about it and really want to strive to do well and work with excellence. Yeah. And oftentimes that can cause our minds to kind of start to spiral at times, but really feel the weight that other people are carrying in unique ways. And so this topic today is it's so good for us to be talking about.
Yeah, and you think about like all the things you just shared that are really work related, and yeah, it's a church setting, but even leaders I know in the marketplace are carrying all kinds of almost like pastoral level weight for employees and staff. But then there's all the personal weights people carry. I talk with families that have kids who are struggling, kids who are locked up, kids who are dealing with drug addictions, spouse or marriage situations themselves. I mean, there's like all these work things and then all the personal things. One of the things that we talked about at the retreat, and this is what we want to spend some time on today, is just really what things are we supposed to carry and what not. And we looked at a passage from Galatians 6. I want to read it because I think it's a really, really helpful passage, and then we'll kind of unpack it a little bit. So this is Galatians 6, and I'm going to read verses 2 to 5, but verse 2 and verse 5 are actually the key ones for today. So the Apostle Paul's writing, he says, "Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone without comparing themselves to someone else." Then finally, verse 5, "For each one should carry their own load." And what really is interesting to me about this passage is it feels like there's like a contradiction just straight up in the text. Verse 1, carry each other's burdens. Verse 5, each one should carry their own load. I was like, okay, which one is it? Am I supposed to do my own thing, or is this, like I'm supposed to share it or what? But what was just absolutely eye-opening for me is realizing that Paul is using two different Greek words here very intentionally. And so the word burden in verse 2 is baros. And this is a crushing kind of weight, all right? This is like, I can't carry this alone, crisis level stuff. The image that I think of when I think of a baros level kind of weight, of a baros level kind of burden, is if I've got a massive boulder in my backpack. I mean, just insane weight, and that sucker is strapped on there, and it's like, this is painfully heavy. Yeah. So that's baros. When you think of baros, I mean, what comes to mind for you on those kind of things?
Yeah, right. I mean, I'm thinking of like major stuff. You have like a death in the family, any kind of just major crisis, major emergency, stuff that, you're not planning for, but it comes at you and usually shocks you, usually surprises you. Yeah. And that is just a heavy weight that people carry for sure.
Yeah, totally. Like I even think of just some of those examples I just gave of personal weights. If somebody hears, oh, my child got locked up or something, I mean, that's, oh my goodness, this is a huge deal.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the baros side. Then there was there's a second Greek word used when it says in verse 5, each one should carry their own load. And that is the Greek word fortion.
Now, if you were to, I imagine, every language has an accent.
Yeah.
If there's a Greek accent, what would you say? I didn't go to seminary, so enlighten me with what's the Greek accent? How would you say that?
That's a good question. And because biblical Greek is no longer spoken today,
you're gonna have to make it up.
We're gonna have to make it up. I think that we should make whatever accent we want up, and we can each. Hold on, let's get it each in our head. Here, hold on. Okay, I've got mine. Do you have yours?
Oh, yeah. I was ready to go the minute you said
it. Yeah, because you brought the question up.
I did not think about it.
Go for it.
Fortion. Like it has like
I
a
like some
command
gusto
to it. Fortion, like a little bit of Italian.
I like that.
I'm considering the region,
Yes.
I don't know, what came to your mind?
I was thinking more like, I'm not even sure if this is French or not. I was like,
Oh, here we go.
Fortion?
Ooh. Well, when you end with a question, I think it's French. I think that's the definition of it. So,
Well, here's what I feel like.
that.
I feel like your pronunciation would be better for the first one, because the first one is
Barras.
crushing weight. You know?
let's do that.
I'm like, you got Barras. And I'm like, or you could put a Fortion.
I think we're onto something.
Oh
We're
my
gonna have to
gosh.
record
All right.
this. Okay.
Taking my jacket off here
Okay.
today. Justin's in the house. I'm starting to sweat. The humor level is high.
This is great.
So, all right. So, Fortion. And if the first one was this idea of like, I am carrying a boulder, I'm going to say the second one is just my own personal backpack.
Yeah.
Very different image. One is this massive boulder. Another one is like the backpack I take to work every day. Normal life responsibility stuff. So when I say that Fortion kind of a thing, that backpack stuff, what's that normal stuff in your mind?
Yeah, I think of it as like the things you're trying to be about, the disciplines you have. So your own spiritual growth, your own attitude, the way that you kind of present yourself, your obedience, your calling, the kind of things that, the kind of person you want to be about, you're living out those things, and that's your weight to carry to say, basically, I want to model Christ, I want to pursue him, follow him, and so that responsibility is for me to bear.
Yeah.
And I think, it's kind of along those lines with responsibility.
Yeah, that's good. Two very different categories. So here's like, for me, here is the big insight from this verse. And this to me was like, just kind of an eye-opening thing. I think many leaders, definitely, and many people in general, basically get crushed when they try to carry someone else's load as if it were a burden.
Yeah.
I think what happens way too often is we have that spirit of carry each other's burdens, but we apply it to someone's load. The load belongs to them. Your spiritual life is kind of your spiritual life. But I think what happens is, and we'll talk about motive a little bit later, but what happens is I start like really carrying a burden for your spiritual life. And really, that's your load to carry, not my burden to share. And I think the reason why many of us feel like we're either overwhelmed, we're tired, we're getting burned out in some cases, is because not only are we trying to share burdens, but we're also shouldering all kinds of additional loads. And so I want our leaders to kind of think about that. And there's probably some examples we could have on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, knowing we were going to talk about this topic and just thinking about biblical examples of where you see this played out, there's a pretty key one that people draw on often, but I just think it really hits core to what this topic is trying to get at. In Exodus, Moses is leading the Israelites. They're going through the desert.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was trying to remember, you may know more. Are we talking nearly 1 million people here, right? That Moses is trying to lead 800,000? We're going to go with it. And we're going to
Definitely north of 7 figures.
Okay, perfect. North of 7. Good. But that's a lot of people. We can all agree. It's a lot. You're going to check
ChatGPT
all right,
now.
Chat, we need your help.
Yeah.
Okay, so Exodus 18, Moses is leading these people.
Yeah.
And as you're leading, I mean, you're walking through a desert. Naturally, there are going to be some issues that arise. So I'm just going to read straight part of the passage, and then we can talk a little bit of some of the themes that we're seeing here. But Exodus 18, starting in verse 13, it says, "The next day Moses took his seat to serve as judge for people, and they stood around him from morning until evening." Oh my goodness, I'm exhausted just reading that.
Yeah.
I can't imagine. I come here from 9 to 5, so to speak, and I'm ready to go. But him, morning to evening. So then his father-in-law, which I think his name is Jethro.
Jethro.
I did not get that part, but
Great name.
Love that name.
We
Jethro.
nicknamed Jared that early on.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
He's a Jethro.
We still
I can
call him
see that.
Jethro periodically, actually.
Lucky
So
guy,
yeah,
guy.
so
All
Jethro.
right, so when his father-in-law, Jethro, saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he said, "What is this you are doing for the people? Why do you alone sit as judge while all these people stand around you from morning until evening?" Fair question. Moses answers him, "Well, because the people, they come to me and they seek God's will. And whenever they have a dispute, it's brought to me. And I decide between the parties and inform them of God's decrees and instructions." And again, 7 figures. We got 1 million people coming to one guy.
If I had to guess, I'd probably think 2 to say 2.5 million.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying.
We'll see. All
I
right.
may have done some research on this.
So wise. Okay, so in response to that, Moses is saying, well, because they come to me and I got to tell them how to, what God says. So then Jethro says, what you are doing is not good. I mean, he just shoots it straight. What you are doing is not good.
Yeah.
You and these people, so again, you and these people who come from you will only wear yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot handle it alone. So, you have Moses solving all of these people's problems, and kind of a third party, so to speak, comes in, says, what are you doing? Kind of takes an assessment, and just his gut feeling is, this is not good.
Right.
You're going to get worn out. The people are going to get worn out, and nobody's going to be helping anybody after a while. And I think you just have a theme here for Moses. I mean, God called him to lead the people out of Egypt, him and his brother Aaron, and that was great. But as now he's leading, he's feeling that weight. It's going to burn him out. It's going to burn the people out. And his main reason for why he's doing it is because people are coming to him.
Right.
There's just kind of this natural need and this natural response that Moses has. Again, people wired for care and compassion just at their core. And so he feels the responsibility and well, I have to help him. It must be my assignment. This is part of God saying, lead my people. Mm-hmm. And Jethro says, that's going to kill you if you keep that up, man.
Yeah, that's such a good example. And so valuable to have somebody like a Jethro come into his life and be able to look at it clearly and say, hey, this is not good. We need those people. I want to spend a minute. When we were first talking about this at staff, I was really thinking about what some of those key areas are that we tend to carry. And here, Jethro's saying to Moses, you need to, there's the big stuff, yes, but a lot of these other things need to be distributed. And so I want to just go through a few things I jotted down when it comes to some of the burdens that we carry that are not ours to carry. And you've mentioned some of them already, to be honest. But I want for the listener, I want to just to kind of make these clear. One of them we already said is people's spiritual outcomes. Yeah. And we think about that in ministry all the time. Yeah. Like, I need to be faithful to what God has called me to as a pastor. But at the end of the day, and it's frustrating in some ways, I can't make anybody do anything. And this applies especially, I think, even to parents, because parents really, really feel this. Like, I am trying to do my very best to raise my children in certain ways. But at the end of the day, we do not control their spiritual outcomes.
Yeah, it's so good, especially when you have a view of God's heart for the one. You really do see individuals. And so at a pastor level, you care about every single person and their individual life and their spiritual walk. And you can't care for everybody. Right. It's the whole Moses thing. You have to let some of that go.
Yeah, that's right. So that's one thing that we've just got to recognize, I have some care about it, but I can't control it.
Yep.
People's emotional states. I feel like this is a really big one. We can care about where people are at emotionally, but I can't regulate their emotions. And we both know there's some people that, tend to get sad real easily or angry, or they're really pessimistic or fearful. And man, I've just learned over the years, in the old days, I don't know if you've had this much, I wanted to kind of cheer people up or take the pessimist and try to say, but here's the sunny side of it, or whatever. Here's the silver lining. And I've just realized, man, I mean, their emotions. Somebody actually pushed back on this when we were at the retreat. They said, "Well, yeah, but people can do things to make you mad," and I go, "Yeah, that's true. I mean, people can do something to make you mad or sad or whatever." But I guess what struck me is thinking about it, where you stay emotionally is your choice. So yes, somebody can do something that really frustrates you or even angers you or hurts you, but are you going to live perpetually hurt, angry, whatever? So were you going to say something?
Well, I just think so much of that comes to gauging your thought life. Like, it's one thing to care and be with people, and that's so good. But if you find yourself feeling the weight of that in the way that you keep thinking about it, it causes you to worry. It causes you to have fear. It stresses you out. That's a sign that you might be carrying something that's not yours. But to get in there with somebody, to care for them, to love on them, but then at the end of the day, have a peace about walking away and kind of going to your next thing. I think that's where you notice the healthy side of compassion and really caring for somebody, and a sign that maybe if that just lingers with you and it just now you become the one with the burden that's not yours, that might be the sign that you're kind of overextending there.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. You already kind of got at this with the example from Moses, but every problem you hear about, urgency does not equal calling. And you and I both hear problems that people are feeling like, oh my goodness, like this is a big deal. Sometimes it is, but every big deal or something that people feel is urgent doesn't translate to that is my problem to solve. Fourth thing I wrote down was people's opinions of us.
Oh, this one's good.
Yeah, I mean, this is, to me, one I love to try to control and manage, and I think over years now I've gotten better at just releasing this. But at the end of the day, we can be high integrity people, we can do our very best to serve people, and yet even then we just can't make people think certain things. Has this been something like, do you feel like it's easy for you to not to worry about people's opinions, or do you feel like, no, that's something I have to think about and not, let it take too big of a role?
I don't know what it was. It's something in my wiring, childhood, whatever it is. I feel this one a lot, because people do matter to me. I love connecting with them. I love when people are having a good time and they're interacting well. And, like what you were saying before, you want people to be positive and happy, and especially in their opinion of me. And that is a really good reminder to just keep in that head space of like, I can't control what other people are thinking. I can't carry that weight. Yeah. And I think that's a really good one. Yeah,
that's a burden that is not supposed to be, or a load, I should say, that's not supposed to be on our backs.
Yeah.
Then the last thing I just noted here was just someone else's approach to life or ministry. And I put this down because I think sometimes you see people doing something that's like different than how you would do it.
Like loading a dishwasher?
Yeah, that's a great example.
Oh my gosh, that gets me every time.
We're 28 years in and we're still figuring that one out, man. But like, you have a view. We all think our way is the best. We all think our way is the most effective. And so it's really tempting to want to like have this, oh man, I need to fix this. I need to straighten them out. I need to coach them. And at the end of the day, they're different than you, which means they're going to do it differently than you. And it's just one of those things I have to release. That's, even between us, we talk about this regularly on any given issue, question, whatever. We talk a lot about ministry. We have many similar views, but we differ all the time on things. Yeah. And we just have to be at peace with, like, there are times where you're gonna say, hey, that's how Brian would do it is not how I would do it, but that's his thing to, that's kind of his load. And there are times where you're doing something and I'm like, well, I'd probably do it differently, but again, that's your load and I don't want to like shoulder that myself. So I think that's good. I think that one of the deeper question, all this to me, when we're trying to talk about where are we supposed to carry each other's burdens and share loads, is digging deeper in our own hearts and asking, why do we tend to take on loads that are not ours to carry? Why do we tend to say, hey, I know that's your backpack, but maybe I could, put it on? And I think that's really a deeper question for reflection that we could spend some time on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and honestly, I would guess most people don't ask that question. By default, people just do, But especially to that last point that you mentioned about just different approaches to doing things, and I think one of the big reasons is people just genuinely want to help. Like when I think about times where I've stepped in to maybe tell somebody how I would do something, it genuinely comes from a place of I see them either struggling or see like, hey, that could be better, or that you could do that faster. I mean, I'm a major efficiency guy, so I often have to throttle this back, but it comes from a place of genuinely wanting to help. Yeah. However, I do think that someone's desire to want to help can go too far, and you can get to a point where you feel like you got to help everybody, and that everybody's problems and situations are dependent upon you, and then you get a little bit of that like Messiah complex thing where you feel like you're the savior that everybody needs, and it's just not like that. So I think that comes from a good place initially, but we just got to be careful that doesn't get out of control. I think pride, of course, is just woven throughout this, wanting our significance, believing just that we're better in some ways, that kind of to that last point of our way is better. That's kind of rooted in pride at some level. sort of related, I would say this whole feeling that we have of wanting to be needed, having purpose, having a place. I bet Moses loved the fact that people were coming to him saying, "Hey, I got a problem."
Yeah.
You're like, "Well, of course you got a problem. You come to Moses." Moses was Italian. Okay, yeah. It always comes back to him.
This is a global podcast.
It is. It is. We got to get some other cultures in on this, but no, I think there is a level that Moses is feeling, and that we all feel of it. Is nice to be needed, to be that person that people come to, or if you try to seek it out yourself, And then the last one, I think, again, in just the day-to-day situations where we're trying to help people, we're trying to shoulder their emotion, their burden, I think we don't want to disappoint them. If someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, I got this thing I'm dealing with," I don't want to let them down. Like, I want to help, I want to give my perspective, I want to encourage them, whatever it may be. And I don't want them to be disappointed. I don't want to disappoint myself. And if I feel like I didn't measure up to what they needed, or I could have done more. So there is a little bit of that like disappointment factor that you're trying to avoid. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's more reasons than that, but those are just a few that came to my mind at first.
Yeah. That's so good. I think, and so I'm just going to recap what you said, because I think for those who are listening right now, just thinking about if you find yourself picking up some of those loads we talked about earlier that really are not yours to carry, they're that person's backpack to carry. What are some of those needs? And again, I think you said on the good side, help, but that can sometimes turn into Messiah complex, so kind of almost an over-desire to help, pride, a desire to feel needed or important or valuable, and then finally fear of disappointing either that person or yourself. So those are the different reasons. Now, I'll tell you, Josh, when we were at the retreat, it wasn't until this happens when you're teaching on stuff and when we were going through all these things, and we could tell our staff was connecting, it was helpful, all that. I realized afterward there was one key thing I missed. This is sort of like an opportunity to rectify that, because the thing I realized that we missed when we were talking about it, it was such a great opportunity to point back to Jesus and really recognize that all the things you just talked about are going to continually be losing battles unless and until we have Christ in our lives in ever-increasing kind of ways. So I'm going to just go through exactly what you just said. Yep. I thought, okay, if I'm tempted to have a Messiah complex where I just have to help that person, I'm always going to be tempted to be a Messiah unless I have a greater Messiah. And I recognize He is the Savior. He is the one who's going to be the ultimate rescuer. That's not my job. So good. I thought about the pride one, and we all deal with pride of, my way is the best way. And I thought, man, once I know that Jesus had to die on a cross because my brokenness and yours is that severe and that significant, there's not a lot of room left for pride at that point. The cross is inherently a humbling thing when you come to know Jesus. So I feel like to deal with that, we need Jesus. The whole idea of feeling needed and valuable. We're always going to be trying to prove that we're valuable through external means until we really come home to our value comes in being beloved children of God. Yeah. We'll just constantly be like, but look at this. This is why I'm important. This accomplishment is why I'm important. Look at how my kids turned out. And again, until in Christ, we know I'm God's son or God's daughter, we're still going to be trying to prove it, basically. And then the last thing you said was disappointing ourselves and others. And this one I actually think makes us have to go one even level deeper than that, because I'm like, to me at least, I think, why are we so afraid of disappointing ourselves or somebody else? And ultimately, it's because I feel like my identity is in what either I think of myself or what you think of me, instead of my identity being in Christ. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I wanted to bring all those things up to really highlight for those who are listening. If you want to overcome some of these internal things that are prompting you to take on people's loads, man, you need to go to Jesus in ever deepening ways.
Yeah, that is so good. And again, we had talked about it. People don't ask themselves enough the why of how they're acting, but what you're getting at is ultimately the thing I think people just need to go to the Lord with and just go deep on that stuff. That coming back to one's identity is huge. And so many things in life, like you said, we're so distracted and kind of doing our own thing. And if we would just come back to the root of who we are in Christ, man, it's just helpful. It doesn't fix everything. Not like everything goes away, but in processing some of the why that we're doing things and to just know who we are in Christ, it changes everything. So I think that's so good.
Yeah.
The last thing that I had thought about just this topic in general is you could actually flip this. We've been talking a lot about how we carry other people's burdens, but I don't know, just started thinking about like what the reverse of that, like us giving our burdens to other people when we shouldn't be. Like the things that are ours to carry, when can we sometimes like pass that off to somebody else or try to be like, oh, that's not for me, that's for somebody else, when really that is for me, but I'm just going to give it,
Yeah.
So what do you think about that?
That's the next level uncomfortable question is what I think that is.
Kind of the matrix of carrying burdens. You're down that next level, but.
Well, it's funny because like it feels really good to say, like virtuous even. What burdens of somebody else, or excuse me, what loads, to stay with the biblical terminology, what loads from somebody else am I taking on because, I'm just so benevolent and I care so much and all that. But my alarm is going off on my phone. That has never happened. What do you say, Justin? Do we keep it in the broadcast?
I said keep it. Let's keep it.
Justin says keep it. All right. It's never happened. It turns out that even after you silence your phone, the alarm
still works.
The alarm still works.
Can't snooze an alarm.
Oh my goodness. Well, I just had a learning.
There you go.
So,
I love it.
So I think that it's funny because it almost feels virtuous to be like, oh, what am I carrying that I shouldn't be? Mm-hmm. But it's a little bit more challenging to ask the question, what am I trying to give away that I should be carrying?
Yeah.
And
a lot of times not even knowing that you're doing it.
Totally. So we'll see if we can come up with some examples here. I've thought a little bit about this question already, and one of the things that I've felt like is a really helpful question to ask is to even discern what an area might be, is where am I tempted to just place blame on people? Like anytime I'm tempted to say, oh, I just feel this because that person did. Oh, I'm not doing this because blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Oh, the situation is the way it is in my life, because anytime that kind of verbiage is coming up, sort of blame verbiage, we're going all the way back to the Garden of Eden, Genesis 3 here. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, it's because of the woman. Anytime that language is coming up, I feel like we possibly, not guaranteed, but possibly are trying to like take off our backpack that God gave us to carry and say, maybe you could take some of this. So I'll give a couple examples. I'd love to hear from you. I'll start maybe with just a couple. Great. Okay. One is our own emotional state and our own challenges that we're feeling, problems that cause certain emotions in us. I think we talked about this earlier, that if somebody gives me, has an experience that causes me to feel angry, I need to own my emotional state for myself. And I think what happens is sometimes people get locked into a certain pattern. Let's say I'm angry or I'm bitter, and the reason why is because, of course, because Josh Josh did this again or whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, like you can pull that card once or twice, but after that, you got to start doing some work on maybe where you're passing the buck to somebody else. And
I would say I see this played out most in probably marriages, or at least people you are really close to. When you feel like, oh, I can just vent with somebody. Mm-hmm. I can just vent with somebody is kind of code language for I can just dump my emotions onto someone else and expect them to empathize with me and carry that for me. And we just got to be careful of what we're doing. It's good to vent, it's good to process and all that, but if we do that in a way where we expect something back, or we expect that, they're going to carry that or do something for it, or that's where we got to be real careful.
Yeah, they're going to make us feel better somehow.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so I think that's one that we can tend to, again, I'm just feeling this, or I'm just angry, or I'm just this because of so-and-so.
Yep.
One that one of our staff members gave us that I thought was really good was he talked about how we can sometimes, you mentioned like our own calling is the backpack God has given us to wear. Mm-hmm. We've got to figure out, based on our wiring and how we're hearing from the Holy Spirit, we've got to figure out where God's leading us. And he said earlier in his leadership journey, he would look to bosses, coaches, mentors, almost to like tell him what his calling was. And on the one hand, I thought, man, it's so cool that you have people speaking into your life.
Right.
But I thought that was a really insightful observation where, man, your calling from God is yours to hear from God. That is squarely in your backpack. And other people can maybe help you discern what's in your backpack and say, hey, it feels like you've got some gifting here or there, but you can't outsource discernment for your calling. I can't say like, hey, Josh, can you put on the backpack for God's calling on my life? No.
Yeah.
You can say, Brian, I see this in you. That's helpful. But ultimately, it's me and the Lord that have to figure out, what my calling is. So those are a couple that come to my mind. Anything come to your mind on this one?
Yeah, that last one I would say definitely to our younger listeners. My wife is a high school teacher, and I would say that comes up a lot. I mean, high schoolers, especially juniors and seniors, are asking big questions about their future. And there are some that are very like owning it and they're going after it, and some that really are just waiting for people to tell them what to do. And I think that's a really good one. One that I jotted down, just the idea of owning your own spiritual development, especially we live in a church world, a ministry context, and it can be easy, whether it's ministry or in your job or in other places too, where you show up and you expect others to do the work for you, or you come like, oh, I go to church and so that checks the box, or I expect my biblical knowledge comes from the teaching on Sundays, so you're responsible for what I know because of what you said. And that's not how it works.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah, that's a really good one, man. Particularly as somebody gets further along in their journey. Like we use this terminology sometimes in the church that we want to help people become self-feeders. And you hear people be like about churches like, oh, I just didn't feel fed. They just weren't feeding me. And I don't know. I'm like, were they preaching the Bible? And if you're like 2, 3, 5 years into following Jesus, I think you're exactly right. Not that good biblical preaching is unimportant. It is important, but at some point you got to migrate to like becoming a self-feeder with the Word of God. So I remember. You
got a few more?
Yeah, I remember once, we were talking, I may be quoting you on this one, okay?
Probably.
So,
you do it all the time.
I remember that you were talking about working with somebody about, getting something that was supposed to get done around Engedi. And they said, well, I emailed this person like 2 weeks ago, and I just haven't heard back. And they were coming to you like, so, what do you want me to do? Yeah. And as I recall it, I think you kind of did some coaching in that moment of saying, hey, you may have emailed them 2 weeks back, and that's awesome. But like the ultimate, getting across the finish line with this, the completing the task, that's still, as the leader, that's like your backpack. Yeah. And so, you were saying, well, what have you done since the email? Have you texted them? Have you called them? Have you, this kind of thing. So I think sometimes we want to outsource our job responsibilities to somebody else. I did my part, and now, hey, it's on them. Well, maybe not. Job satisfaction. I think that we want our coaches and bosses and all that to be really good, but ultimately, your boss is not responsible to make you happy with your job.
Yep. And flip side, the boss, same, can't be complaining about the people, saying culture is the way it is because these are the people that we have. Like, nah, that doesn't work that way either.
That's right. Yeah, it does. That's a good one. That's good. It does go both ways because you're right. If you're the leader and you're complaining about whatever the organization or its morale or its culture, you're the leader.
Yeah, exactly. That's on you.
It's so funny, people talk about like when they start a new job as a leader, or particularly when they start a new job, and let's say they inherit a culture, and for a little bit of time, you can say, "Oh, my predecessor," or "This is what I came into," but there's some number of years that pass when finally it's like, people like to joke, "Hey." You look around and you realize any strengths in this place and any problems, like the buck stops with you. There's no more like, well, this is what it was like when I got here. So
it's all that extreme ownership. This whole theory is just that ownership, owning what you can own and setting the tone. And I think it's good.
Yeah, referencing the book Extreme Ownership.
May have
by
Jocko.
Jocko.
Is that right?
It
Jocko
is.
Willink?
Yeah, I don't know how to say. What is his last name? Willink.
Willink.
Yeah.
I think? Yeah.
Great book. Would you recommend it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think. If there's any parts in there that are not good, I don't recommend those. It's been a minute since I've read that one.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straight up.
I think so.
I think it is. Yeah, good combat scenes.
Yeah,
I don't think there's anything inappropriate, but if there is, Josh doesn't recommend those
Let
parts.
the record show.
Yeah. So, but great book on it.
Yeah.
We took our team through that book of just saying, hey, we're done with, not that we really had a problem with that, but this is kind of one of those muscles you got to hit. Again, back to Genesis chapter 3, Adam blaming Eve. We have this broken instinct in us to say, my mistakes are her fault or his fault. And so extreme ownership. And even this last one, our financial situations, I think there are a lot of people who blame the company they're at for where they're at financially. They blame the government. They blame this. They blame that. What always just challenges me is when you see people who have like every reason to make excuses for where they're at financially, and they go, no, I'm just going to change it. Yeah. And we have somebody who's part of our church that she grew up not in a particularly high income or big education-y kind of family, but she said this is going to change, and her family is now totally broken out of that. I just think that's really cool.
Yeah,
so
that is cool.
Yeah, so all just good examples of where we can tend to try to say, oh, it's their fault,
Right?
And they may be a contributor, but it's still our backpack.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's good.
well, I want to just close with what we started with. Started with the Bible, want to kind of end with the Bible. Galatians 6:2, carry each other's burdens. Galatians 6:5, each one should carry their own load. And I just want to encourage everyone who's listening to really think about what loads you might be carrying that aren't yours to carry. And if you discern that you are carrying some loads that really don't belong to you, I want to encourage you to release those. The interesting thing is that as you release loads that aren't yours to carry, you really get happier. I mean, you just walk with some lightness about you. You don't feel like, oh my goodness, I'm constantly in energy depletion mode. I'm constantly worrying about this person, because you're like, you know what, their load is their load. Yeah. There's also, and this actually hits on a little bit of a book that you had put me onto, but when we release trying to carry somebody else's load, it actually can benefit them. We didn't plan on talking about this, but do you just any reaction on actually if I let you carry your own load, like how does that affect you? What do you think? You want to go there or not?
Thoughts on that? I mean, in the end, it's a benefit. I think it only empowers people to make their own decisions, to process their own feelings, to know how to appropriately deal with their challenge, their situation, their emotion, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And by you coming in and swooping in and saving them every time, thinking I'm doing them a favor, you're not really teaching them anything. They're not learning. They're just going to continue in the same problem. And sometimes you just got to let people figure it out and get through it so that they're better for it on the other side.
Yeah, that's good. And I would think too, and I think we've probably both experienced this, it changes the nature of your relationship too. Because if your relationship dynamic is always you're trying to fix me, save me, rescue me, help me, like if I'm on the other side of that, I feel that.
Yeah.
Now given just quick caveat, parents, we have to do this. We have to figure out where are those key places we're speaking in, obviously. But like if you're a grown adult with other adults and the nature of your relationship is always, oh, that person's trying to help me fix me, that is not, I don't know if that's the kind of relationship I want to be in indefinitely. So I feel like if we pull that out of it, it actually maybe makes us have a better relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
I think that's a good word though, just that idea of so long as we are carrying burdens for people that belong to them, perhaps out of a good-hearted motive, we're actually preventing them from developing the way and maturing the way that they're meant to mature.
Yep.
And it feels like it's helping. In the long term, it's hurting. because that person needs to learn to do all the things you just said. They need to learn to discern. They need to learn to carry their own load. They need to figure out how they're going to process their own emotions. They need to be able to operate without constantly having to lean on other people to navigate the daily strains and stresses of life. So It's counterintuitive. Man, it's counterintuitive to go, yeah, I can let that go and believe that even if it feels like it's going to be harder for them initially, it's going to be better for them over the long haul. So this has been a good conversation. Any final words or thoughts that come to mind on this whole subject of sharing burdens, but ultimately carrying our own load?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of got at it from different angles, but it leads to good things, but man, that first step is not easy. I mean, you are in a pattern, you're in a rhythm, you're wired maybe a certain way. Again, back to Moses. I'm sure, part of it for Moses was really hard to tell that first person, you're not my problem. I mean, he wouldn't say it that way, but you think about like all the Israelites coming to him, think about being the first person that Moses is like, okay, actually, I'm not going to answer you.
Yeah.
That person's really going to be hurt. They're going to be like, wait, what? You answer everybody's questions. Why not me? There is going to be a change, and that's really hard. There's kind of like a rip the Band-Aid moment where you got to make a decision, kind of draw a line in the sand and say, all right, moving forward, this is how I want to help care for people, but in a healthy way, and carry my burden, not others. That's theirs to carry. That first little bit, I mean, it's really hard, and it's not going to feel good, and you're going to quickly, especially for some wired to be more people pleasing, you're going to want to be like, it's this is easier if I just keep doing this, And for Moses, the easy thing to do would have been just keep doing what you're doing. But those first few conversations for him had to be hard, but it's so worth it. You got to do it. You got to figure that out. Pray through that. I think it's good to have friends, counsel, like be processing this with other people, because you're going to need the support. You're going to need people to help you identify maybe some of those bad habits you have so that you can start to move forward in a healthy way.
Yeah, that's a really, really good word. And I think I'm glad you mentioned the people-pleasing thing, because for those of us who are prone to people-pleasing, this gets even harder.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're just so like, oh, I don't want them to be disappointed and I don't want them to be hurt and all those kinds of things. Yeah. That's really good. Yep. I think that the only thing that came to my mind as we kind of wrap is I was just thinking about different times I have released things, and it's really made, and this may be a particular thing to ministry, but you carry so much, you see so much pain that people are dealing with, and if I try to not only just share the burdens with people, but if I try to carry their loads too, man, it's just really hard to maintain joy. And God has called us to be joyful people. And I think when I started early in ministry learning, and it was a hard learning, when I started learning, like, I can't fix it all. It's not even my job to fix it all. I could really step into the space where I'm like encouraging someone, I'm praying for them, but I'm able to then release it and say, now that's your burden to carry with the Lord. And I can have joy in when I go home at night and I'm with my family. I don't still have your backpack on, so to speak. Yeah. And I think that's a really, really important thing, and it's a hard thing to do. That's where I'm so glad for our faith in Jesus, because it lets me say, okay, this is a legit burden. This is a legit load, but again, Jesus is going to shoulder it with them. Right. His yoke is the easy one. That's right. And I'm not the one that's called to share it in the same way he is. So
that's good.
Well, it has been good to hang out with you today and talk about this subject. I hope it's encouraging to people.
Oh, yeah. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in, and we'll have to do it again.
Sounds good.
Start working on a big topic that you're just like, that we have to do a podcast on this.
Oh, it's going to be huge.
It's going to be huge.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we should use even more languages next time. What do you say?
And I'm down for accents.
Now, I was going to say accents is a better way to put it. There have been no languages, and we've probably only insulted. We've actually insulted the cultures by our accents. They're all like, "You didn't build a bridge, you broke it." So anyway,
speaking culture.
But we had fun doing it.
We did.
So
it was a good time.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation today, and it's been helpful to you. It's been encouraging. And if that is the case, please do rate and review Made to Advance. This has been a production of Engedi Church. We've got more great conversations on the way. And so until next time, just know God made you to advance.